What is the point of playing a low magic and low wealth campaign? That's the everyday life we all live, and we're actually playing D&D to escape from, right? This is just a personal axe, like a double-bladed war axe of mine that I want to grind. I hate low magic and low wealth campaigns, and honestly, I think given the choice, most players will prefer tons of magic items and lots of gold. So hopefully I can put your fears to rest and help other narrators run high magic and wealthy campaigns. I do get it from a DM, GM, narrator's perspective. It is much easier to run low magic and low wealth campaigns, but I really want to challenge you to break out of that mindset and really open up this fantasy world for your players to actually be a fantasy. This is especially true if you're running a Tollus campaign. Now, this video is not going to be entirely about Tollus, but the City by the Spire is certainly meant to be a high magic and high wealth campaign. Thus, I'm going to be addressing some aspects of that here because I focus a lot on Tollus in this channel, and that's where personally I run my game. But honestly, if you don't do anything in Tollus, that's totally fine. Everything to follow is still going to be relevant to you. In 5th edition, they completely changed the way magic items work with the attunement mechanic. 3rd edition, 3.5, and Pathfinder all actually planned for characters to have magic items in the challenge rating math. And then in 1st edition D&D, they even gave out experience points for how much gold you got. So no matter what system you're using, I still want to challenge you not to just lean on the crutch of running a low magic and poor campaign. Will it make your job as a narrator a little harder? Maybe. Will it make the game way more fun for your players? Absolutely. Again, I want to reiterate, most of us live in a no magic and low wealth reality. We engage in role-playing games because we want to escape reality and live in a fantasy world for a little bit. So let's just overcome any fears you might have about making your player characters just glow with magic items and then fill bags of holding with countless gold coins. Let's look at what are the fears that lead GMs to run low magic and low wealth campaigns. Well, first off, too many magic items will break the game. High magic will make everything the characters face too easy. Buying and selling magic items shouldn't happen, right? Too many magic items in the world will cheapen the existence of magic. Lots of magic will just make everything too easy. And too much wealth will make the characters simply retire, okay? Honestly, all of these are basically the same fear. You're afraid it's going to break the game and make everything too easy for the characters. So let's discuss how you can run high magic and high wealth campaigns without breaking the game. First off, you're the narrator. If things are too easy, just make them harder. Also, having piles of gold doesn't mean much when you're in the middle of a fight. Actually, it might be a hindrance. Then having 3 plus 1 weapons doesn't really help that much unless one of those weapons gets destroyed. And I mean, you only have 2 hands after all. That actually depends on what race you're playing in D&D, so that might not be true. Most characters only have 2 hands, so they can't use 5 weapons at the same time. Also, realistically, if a real person had a Scrooge McDuck tower of gold, then yeah, they likely wouldn't put their life on the line regularly, but this is a game. Those characters are controlled by your players who want to keep the game going. Tons of wealth is not going to make them want to stop. Bottom line, it's not going to break the game. Let's talk about high wealth first because I actually feel that's the simplest one to address. Having a dragon's hoard in gold and gems does not automatically make your characters' lives easier. You cannot kill a monster with gold pieces. Actually, that's an interesting idea, but let's move on for a second. I'm going to paraphrase my favorite movie. It's A Knight's Tale. You could say, a gold piece is good for nothing. You can't eat a gold piece. A gold piece can't keep you warm. We already said, the characters might think about retiring, but the player wants to keep going. So what can Mountains of Wealth do for your PCs? They could buy +10 magic armor and weapons. They could buy limitless wish spells and bring all their stats up to 30. They could hire mercenaries to do all the work for them. They could buy out a monarch and take over the entire kingdom. Okay. So what? I'm not trying to be flippant or rude. I'm serious. What's the worst thing that could happen? All of those things actually sound like amazing story arcs to me. So embrace that scary. The characters do every single day, right? Wink, wink. Honestly, let's say you're screaming at your screen right now. You're screaming at me and you're saying, I don't want to do that. No problem. You're in control of everything in your world. If you don't want your player characters to have +10 magic items, then don't make them available. If you don't want them to cast Wish constantly, well, first, if they can't cast it themselves, then they have to find somebody capable of and willing to cast it. Well, the wizard powerful enough to cast Wished probably doesn't need gold, but maybe instead they want the group to complete a quest. Now, if the players can cast Wish themselves, then you're pretty much already running an epic campaign and they're probably already filthy rich. But even then, in some editions, there are very specific material components which aren't always readily available. In others, there's an XP cost, and in even others, you can burn out your ability to cast the spell ever again. So the point is, you control the entire world. What they want to buy might not be available, or that person might not want money. So now all of that gold they have is useless. Now, what about hiring people to do everything for them? First, adventurers are clinically insane individuals, and they are incredibly rare. Mercenaries are not going to want to go into dungeons and face dragons. The pay, no matter how good, doesn't matter if you're dead. Second, doing that means that the PCs are going to get way less experience. They're not going to level up, and then any of the mercenaries crazy enough to help them might wind up surpassing the PCs or get powerful enough to turn on them. Your players want their characters to do the cool stuff. And let's be honest, managing an army is a nightmare, okay? Maybe they want to buy an entire country. Cool. Again, this is a lot of work, meaning for your players. Your players are not going to want to sit around a table and write out contracts for trade negotiations and peace treaties. They're not going to want to listen to nobles complain about how their serfs aren't producing enough grain. They want to adventure, fight, and explore. If you just said your characters actually, players want to do trade negotiations and everything, then you probably need to find a game other than D&D. But that brings me to my next point: fight, adventure, explore. Find ways to drain their resources. I don't mean just take away what they've earned. I mean, give them a way to spend it that's fun. In Tolus, there's actually a restaurant where you can spend 1,000 gold in one night. All right, maybe your players want to buy a castle. Great. It costs a lot to pay staff, guards, and a major domo. My Tolus characters are literally all going to wind up with real estate, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. My first attempt at running a filthy rich campaign was 2 paladin brothers. They were incredibly wealthy, even at first level. What we did was they had an entire retinue that traveled with them. They had wagons, servants, cooks, grooms, a whole staff. And honestly, it was a blast. It provided tons of extra story opportunities because it wasn't just 2 guys walking through the woods camping. It was dozens of people. Now, obviously, none of the people actually adventured with them. We just thought that it would be really funny to never have to sharpen their own swords, have assistants present to don their armor, and have professionally prepared meals rather than eating trail rations. So create ways to drain your players' wealth, which they're going to actually find fun. Talk to them. Ask them what would be entertaining to blow mountains of gold on. What is going to be part of their fantasy? The next idea is rough, and this should be used very, very sparingly. But there is one way to drain your players' gold and other wealth, and that's to steal it. Robbery is a constant threat to the wealthy. Why do you think everybody's going after dragons? If it's well known that your characters have huge sums of gold, massive caches of magic items, then you better believe there's criminals that are going to want to help relieve them of that burden. Again, don't do this very often, but it can certainly be a constant threat. And guess what that threat makes your PCs do? They're gonna spend more money on security measures to protect their wealth, okay? Then there's another form of robbery, which is actually completely legal, and it's seldom discussed in RPGs, and that's taxes. You think your players accumulating tons of gold isn't gonna catch the eye of the local lords, ladies, monarchs? All of those people in power are gonna want a cut. Or perhaps instead of taking your PC's gold, they're gonna want favors instead. Boom, plot hooks. I'm actually going to be using some Tolus leverage with taxes in my campaign, where maybe the players haven't been doing so good about paying their taxes, and that's going to have some repercussions. To sum up though, gold is basically useless unless somebody wants it. You control the economy and what exists for purchase in your economy. Your player characters having millions of gold pieces is pointless if they're in a tiny town where the most expensive thing is a horse. Plus, you can mix it up. Wealth doesn't necessarily mean countless gold pieces. Throw in art pieces and strange stuff. Throw in a solid gold statue that's 10,000 pounds. Make your items unique. Now, you've got an adventure just about trying to move the thing, or maybe when they're in the middle of a fight, they've got a rolled up, incredibly expensive piece of artwork that they're trying to get out of the dungeon with and not have it damaged, because then it becomes useless. Some of this wealth that your players are going to get, they're going to want to sell, but then think about some of the stuff that's going to be cool that they don't necessarily want to get rid of. If you can't think of like weird art objects, just Google random treasure generator. I put a link to one of my favorite down below, but anything that you can find will pretty much give you some decent ideas. Then one fun thing I've done in my Ptolus game for a little while is not treating a gold piece as just a gold piece. Just like any of the money that you hold today, coinage has changed countless times throughout history. Coins were traditionally stamped with the monarch's face who was in power at that time. So I've had some fun with certain gold pieces being worth less than others. I've had some cursed. And then I've had some times where people refused to accept coins as payment until the PCs took them, had them re-smelted, and then made to match the modern mint. So that they had to pay to have that done, which cost them a little bit of gold. So just a few ideas there to think about. Not every gold piece that's sitting in a dungeon is necessarily the exact same. Have different faces be on them. Use those as there's a dwarven gold piece, there's an elven gold piece, there's an orcish gold piece, that you've got all of these different rich people and characters and history, and you could use even the money they find as part of that history. I could think of a movie where they got a whole bunch of gold pieces and just trying to put the gold pieces back was an adventure. Kudos if you get that one. So that said, let your player characters be rich, okay? Give them things to blow money on. Castles, airships, extravagant parties, significant others, fancy clothes, and yes, magic items. No, this is not a fancy shirt. Don't make fun of me. But extremely powerful magic items are rare, and they're honestly not going to be available on the open market. The people who have those are going to want more than just gold. In Ptolus, there's actually an organization called the Dreaming Apothecary, which exists to just make custom magic items. Now, they want large sums of gold. It takes a long amount of time to create them, and depending on the request, they again might tell the PCs that they don't just want gold, they want maybe a favor or something else. Boom, another plot hook. Then in my Ptolus game, Vo actually built an entire 3-story shop. She had to buy all the materials. She bought a Lyre of Building, which is a magic item that actually does construction. Now, your PCs could do that, or they could hire people. Our players bought furniture and decorations for the place. And then they also had to pay to clean out the basement dungeon that was there before. This is all fun stuff that they're blowing their characters' gold pieces on, but it's just something that's fun to them and they enjoy, and they have this home base. Deacon the Wizard is about to buy a tower that's going to need a ton of renovations. Julia might be getting an abandoned mansion, which takes a lot of work to fix up. Barash is going to wind up with a castle. It's actually the Pythoness house from Ptolus, if you need to check that out. Night of Dissolution Adventure. And it's going to require fixing, furnishing, and more cleaning stuff out. All of these places are going to take paid staff to maintain, and they're all going to have upkeep costs and taxes because the PCs want to be off earning more gold, not staying behind scrubbing the floors, right? Then any stronghold is going to require security and magical protections to keep out the ne'er-do-wells. There's actually 2 great books that can help you with things like this. One of them is an old 3rd edition book called the Stronghold Builder's Guidebook, which has very detailed instructions and costs on actually building a home base for your players. Then Matt Colville of MCDM created Strongholds and Followers. One really cool thing about his book is that your characters can actually get powers and other benefits from having a stronghold. And I'm using both of these books in our Ptolus campaign. In addition, I'm also using the Stronghold and Followers intelligence organization rules for my DMPC, Beli, who was turned into an NPC when we moved him out of the campaign where he's just in the background. He's actually building a network of people to provide information on the goings-on in the city. I basically want him to be like a human Jarl Axel. All right, so organizations can be fun. I've got links to both of those below if you've never heard of those or want to check those out. Now, let's move on to discussing high magic campaigns. The fear is the exact same thing. You're worried about breaking the game. That's okay, because the fix is also mostly the same as wealth. You control the world. If your players do wind up with +5 everything, like weapon, armor, stat increasing items, etc., you just make the challenges harder. Instead of 5 orcs, now it's 20. Instead of 1 red dragon, it's mommy, daddy, and 2 babies. More than likely, what's going to happen is your players are going to wind up with redundant items. 4 +1 swords, 10 +1 chain shirts, So what? They can't use all of them. Maybe they could give them to their home base guards. Maybe they could sell them. Great, your player characters love loot. They want to level up. Let them. Don't be afraid. Or gasp. What if the magic armor they sold had special markings on it, and later they see those markings worn on the armor of the foes that they're facing? Haha, dum dum dum. Now, they're even scared to sell the armor because they don't know that the bad guys might buy it and use it against them. That's slightly devious. You can also mix up magic items. Rather than just a bunch of +1 swords, use a random weapon generator that actually gives you custom descriptions of each item. You could also have weapons that each have different properties. You could have a +1 trident, which gives the players a swim speed. You could have a +1 longsword that grants fire resistance. This gives your players extra tools in their bag, which means they're going to want to keep the items instead of just sell them, and it makes them feel special and prepared, like they've got just the right thing for what you throw at them. Then there's another book that I love. It's actually the 3.5 D&D version book, Weapons of Legacy. 3 of my Tollus campaign characters actually have Weapons of Legacy, which the point of these is that they get more powerful. The magic item, the weapon, gets more powerful as the player character gains levels. So this is a great way to have your players start with a low power weapon at the beginning of the campaign and keep that same weapon as they gain power, rather than constantly be looking to throw away the low level sword for the next highest level. I've got a link to that down in the description below. And then there is a really cool quote. I won't read the whole thing because I don't want to plagiarize, but Christopher Paolini wrote the awesome Aragon series, and in the book Brissinger, he has the chapter, I Need a Sword. And I love that this armor smith is, or not smith, he doesn't make it, but he's an armorer, is telling Aragon that the sword a hero carries is incredibly important. He said if that sword starts out not having a name, then the bards are going to give it a name. He says that people are going to expect to see the warrior with that weapon. Characters often wind up with iconic weapons, their armor, their magic items. So I've actually got a video where I talk about fame and infamy. Check that one out after this one's done. But personally identifiable items are going to be more valuable to their characters. They're going to feel special, and it's going to make them less likely to always just want the next highest modifier. Everybody knows Vo in my campaign by her twin purple crystal echo blades. If you don't know what those are, they are a bard's delight. I've got a link down below. Then everybody knows Talon now by his reforged legacy lion sword. Everybody knows Jarl Axel by his feathered hat with the big plume sticking out of it. Name the items like the stories of old. Vo's swords are named Serenity and Clamor. Talon's sword is Solar Song. Then everybody knows Drist carried Twinkle and Icing Death until one was destroyed, and then there was a whole quest for him to get Vrindeath, I believe. And honestly, if you were like me, you probably mourned the breaking of that blade like a beloved character died. The idea here is still that it's a high magic setting, but you make those items special, and they're not just a +1 sword. Or you grow those weapons or other armor and items power with the characters over time. There's 2 other great articles that I link down below. One is by 3 Wise DMs. The other one is on cbr.com. And they talk about how to run signature magic items and put them into your campaigns. And then also just how to make magic items feel important. So I don't want to repeat all of their stuff here. Those are great. Check those out after the video. Next, if your monsters have magic items in their possession, they should absolutely be using them. That list of treasure down at the bottom doesn't mean it's just in a pile in the corner waiting for your guys to pick up. How much more painful is it when the bad guy is using the wand of fireballs against the party when now your PCs know he's literally using up their loot? Every time he chugs a potion of healing, that's one less for them to get. Then consumable magic items are a great way to give your bad guys power and magic that's not going to permanently unbalance your character's power. They're going to use them up eventually. Then even if they wind up with huge caches of magic items, they can only use so many, and there's only so much of a market for them to sell them. So if they do sell them, then see my previous talking about managing lots of wealth, right? The point of this section was to talk about running high magic. Sorry, we want to have fun with that. Magic is one of the biggest components of D&D that makes it magical. Remember, high magic doesn't have to just mean your characters are laden down with magical arms and armor. Read the Dungeon Master's Guide and the panoply of magic items from all the sources throughout all the ages on the internet. There are so many cool, wondrous items which aren't even combat focused. Immovable rods, deck of many things, decantlers of endless water, handy haversacks, bags of holding. Most of this stuff just makes the characters' lives easier and more interesting and won't necessarily outbalance and mess up your combat numbers. Barash is becoming famous for his love for his adamantine tool. It's a reconfigurable tool, and he asked if he could have this. I said yes, and he uses the thing all the time now and absolutely loves it. I think it's something Traveler's Tool. I should have looked that up before I wrote this, but anyway, that's just another fun thing that it's becoming kind of iconic that Barash, this huge bulky warrior, also has this super handy tool. Then one of my favorite parts of our Artolis campaign is actually how much magic is in the city. If you think about it, if high-level wizards existed in the real world, you better bet there would be some amazing, marvelous stuff. So just let your imagination run wild. Have spectral horse-drawn carriages, have levitating transportation, magical lights, ooze-filled sewers that eat everybody's waste, flying ships. This one honestly holds a very special place in my heart because my first ever character, when I was playing 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, he actually built a flying Viking longship, and that was just a ton of fun. Oh, high magic means the world is just more exciting and fun and filled with fantasy. In Tolis, I am constantly mentioning how like there's a wizard flying overhead, there's a flying ship, there's a carriage that's floating instead of having wheels, or they see another NPC that's just laden down with tons of magic items. Just let your imagination go crazy and don't hold back. This is a fantasy role-playing game. When you start to think about spells, whatever the characters have, the bad guys should have and more. The bad guy's lair should be protected from divinations and teleportations, and just because your characters get more magic doesn't mean they can just walk through every encounter. There's always a bigger fish, or in our game, a bigger dragon. Plus, bad guys usually have a lot longer to prepare than your PCs do. Dragons, liches, elven wizards, vampires, these things all live for hundreds or thousands of years, which means they're not just sitting around waiting for your characters unprepared. They are constantly layering new, more, and better protections on their layers, which should influence your PCs to do the exact same thing with whatever you give them. Higher wealth and higher magic in your campaign can potentially make your job as a DM a little bit harder. I give you that. But again, I guarantee your players are going to love it. Give them lots of stuff. Make them use the stuff. Take some of the stuff away. Just let them feel like heroes. That's why we all play this game. Earlier in my DMing career, I actually got a little discouraged when my players just kind of blew through encounters. I honestly felt like they were going to get bored by not being challenged, but honestly, it was the exact opposite. My players loved feeling like just bad out heroes mopping the floor with the bad guys. If you think about your favorite movies, the main characters go through dozens or hundreds of minions without taking a scratch. So if you have a few blowout encounters because your people have a lot of resources, just smile and ratchet up the next one. For today, I really just want you to embrace that it's going to be okay to run a wealthy and powerful campaign. I guarantee your players are going to love it. Now, if you think I should share more specifics about how to handle higher wealth and higher magic campaigns, let me know in the comments. Often when I watch other videos, I'm left thinking like, great, you're super creative and have these awesome ideas, but now I have no idea how to apply them. Well, there's so many systems out there that it's hard to be super specific, especially since personally I run Pathfinder 1st edition and not D&D 5e like probably most of you do. But if you ended this video saying, you didn't tell me anything, let me know in the comments or join me on our Discord, and I'll try to do a deeper dive with specifics and tell you things like that I've done in my campaign and whatnot. But again, I play Pathfinder and not 5e, so I don't want to give out useless information. Now, this video does mark the very first time I've done something, and that is giving out a patron benefit. All of my patrons were given this script for the video before I made it here, and they were allowed to give me feedback on that, which I just absolutely loved. If you would like that perk, or you just want to help me make some extra videos and run my websites, then back me at $1 or $5 a month. I mean, there's no pressure. Do the whole YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, gong the bell, blah, blah, blah. And then lastly, if you're interested in learning more about my Tolis campaign, you can actually read all of the posts that I've put on my website. Our game is completely written. It's a play-by-post campaign, so you can can go and read all of those posts, or you can follow my YouTube series called Tales Under the Spire, which I try to release every week, but it doesn't always happen. And then I've also got it over, there's a few different podcast places you can find it. Either way, until next time, be rich, lay them down with magic items, and stay out of the shadow of the spire.